State today ranked the top quarterbacks in the nation, and guess what? Justin Fields is not there. See if you agree. Well, you got to agree with the number one, Trevor-Lawrence of Clemson, right?
Yeah.
Had somebody better on that list?
No, he's going to be the first pick 2 years from now. Tua's good. Justin-Herbert's going to be a first-rounder. Sam-Ehlinger, people are excited about at Texas. Jake-Fromm's the guy who beat out Justin Fields at Georgia. Adrian-Martinez at Nebraska, I think, is going to be really good. Shea-Patterson's more experienced. This is just a lot of situations. I know some scouts are really high on Jordan Love. Jalen-Hurts was the guy who led Alabama all the way to the national title game before Tua took over. A lot of this is he just hasn't done it. He hasn't done it yet. So I get a ranking like this, but I think he'll be one of the 20 best by the end of the year.
All right, what did Fromm have that he didn't?
You know, that's a good question. I think Fromm probably, it's the experience, it's the reading the defenses, that kind of thing. I think Justin is a more versatile quarterback across the board. But Fromm was a guy who took over because the guy in front of him had gotten hurt and Fromm got a shot. It's so hard. These quarterbacks at these big schools, they stack them, right? They stack them one after another. And the minute you don't play, you transfer.
Well, it happened at Ohio State, basically.
Yeah.
All right, so here you go. He didn't play much at Georgia last year. 27 of 39 completions, 328 yards, no interceptions. That's nice. Was it garbage time, or did Fromm get hurt somewhere along the line?
They were doing some goofy stuff with him where they were trying, I think, to like keep him interested and keep him on the hook, and they were putting him in the middle of games. They were putting him in at times as like a running threat. But they never gave him enough. I think he played maybe like a half in one of the games, but they never gave him enough to really get comfortable. And we saw it like at Ohio State in 2015. It's hard when you're moving quarterbacks in and out. So he's not a rookie. I mean, he's not a freshman. It's his second year of college football, first year at Ohio State. He's played a little, but he's never been given the freedom to say, this is your team.
All right. What are we going to see with Ohio State offensively in the beginning? What we see in the beginning, is that basically the way it's going to be all year, or is it just kind of testing to see what they've got and what they can do?
I think what we see early could be very different from what we see late in the year. Ryan Day talked about this at the Big Ten meetings, that they play 6 games, then they have a bye, then they play 2 more games, then they have a bye. It's a double bye year in college football. Then they play the last 4. That first six he talked about a lot. He said, we're going to have a green quarterback for those first 6 games. So we're going to need everybody else on offense and defense to help pick him up. I think early you're going to see a lot of zone read. You're going to see Justin Fields, the runner. You're going to see him with J.K. Dobbins. They're going to lean on that. And I think by the end of the year, Justin Fields can throw it. He can throw it down the field. He throws a hard ball. By the end of the year, when you're getting to Penn State and Michigan, I think they will be much more of a passing offense. I just think early on, he's going to lean on his legs, and they'll call more run plays for him because he's 10 times the runner that Dwayne Haskins was.
Well, but so am I.
Les, come on. Dwayne Haskins ran for like 8 yards last year. I don't think you could get 8 yards in college football. No offense.
No,
neither could I.
You may be right.
Speaking of turtles.
Yeah. So wait a minute. So tell me if you can compare him to anybody in the last 5 or 6 quarterbacks at Ohio State. Or is it a combination of somebody?
Yeah. I mean, I really think he is a combination. I think there's some Terrelle-Pryor in him.
Okay.
In that he's like a big guy, and I think he can be a long strider and be a guy who gets out in space and gets up the top speed. He's shiftier than Terrelle-Pryor. So nobody is as shifty as Braxton Miller in the open field, but he's got a little more wiggle than Pryor did. And then I think he can throw it. He's a better thrower, I think, than Pryor or Miller or J.T. Barrett. But he's not the thrower that Dwayne Haskins was. So the thing I've been trying to tell Ohio State fans is just take yourself back to what an Ohio State quarterback was before Dwayne Haskins. Wipe Dwayne Haskins from your memory and start thinking about that guy who's definitely a run threat, but can throw it, can get out in the open field, can evade sacks, can make some big plays. And Justin Fields fits in that mold. He could be better than any of them.
Sounds like Troy Smith to me.
There's some of that, and I think he's young Troy Smith. I think he's not going to be 2006 Troy Smith, but he might be 2004 Troy Smith and some 2005 Troy Smith, and that Troy Smith ran all over the place.
He did.
Troy didn't run as a senior because he didn't have to.
All right, you mentioned J.K. Dobbins. Give me a couple of other names of skilled players that they, number one, that they need to perform, and number 2, will they perform?
So one to remember for sure that Ohio State fans know is KJ Hill, who's going to wind up as the all-time leading receiver in Ohio State history, at least in terms of receptions. That's what we're talking about with this guy. He's been super reliable, and he's back for a 5th year. Another guy who's going to be interesting in that slot receiver position, he's not a slot receiver. His name's Jeremy Ruckert. He's a tight end who I think Ryan Day is much more interested in not just using the slot receiver position for small guys and slot receivers, but for doing those tight end mismatches that the NFL uses so much. So it's easy to say he's going to be like Gronk. Nobody's like Gronk, but I think they're going to try to get Jeremy Ruckert split out in space on mismatches with linebackers. He could have a big year. They have a couple receivers back. Chris Olave flashed at the end of last year. He'll be a true sophomore. And then the guy that everyone's watching is Garrett Wilson, a true freshman, who I think could have as good of a year as any true freshman receiver in Ohio State history.
Olave came out of nowhere. He made a couple of plays in a game, and everybody says, let me check my scorecard, see who that guy is. I mean, I don't remember anybody coming out of nowhere like he did.
And he was not a huge recruit. Like, that's what we're talking about. We looked at Julian Fleming on that previous recruiting list. Garrett Wilson was a 5-star receiver. He's a freshman this year. Julian Fleming is a 5-star receiver. So, like, next year and the year after, when you think about Garrett Wilson and Julian Fleming together, that's going to be really super dynamic. But Chris Olave was a 3-star guy from San Diego, and we know sometimes guys like that pop, and I think Chris Olave absolutely can do it.
And the other thing is, if people complain about Ohio State, and I'm not sure why they would, but if they do, you forget how many key players they lose on any given year. In other words, it's not bad recruiting, it's great recruiting. It's just you don't get to use them 3-4 years.
And I think that was one of the big things of KJ Hill coming back. He wouldn't have been a first-round pick. I mean, he might have been a 3rd or 4th-round pick. He definitely thought about leaving. They already lost 3 senior receivers from last year, so to have KJ Hill back to sort of be the old guy in that room, I think was a big deal for them.
216